Ma'am, class, I know this is a little unorthodox, but thank you for your cooperation and your attention. So now that we've applied the concepts from today's lessons to the case and the company we decided to show for you, we're going to now apply it to other courses that you may have taken at West Point. So one of those courses that we saw relate similarly to this lesson are PL 479, Leading Organizations Through Change. One way that I saw that it relates to this course is through the idea of change directors. So this is the idea that there are different types of ways to lead an organization through change, just like the name says. Some of those names include directors, coaches, and essentially what these encompass is the way that you approach your employees in terms of really micromanaging them versus a little hands-off. It's all about the level of trust that's already established in your company. So that tied in well to the lesson that we were talking about today. Another course that we talked about was EM 411, which is project management. For some of you that don't know, this is a part of the systems track in the engineering major. So one of the things this talked about was cooperation, but through different type of organizational structures, such as matrices or functional, for example. So this really talked about is, hey, do we have the right people in the right places? And do we have our organization set up in the sense that the people that are directly affected by decisions can relay feedback up the chain properly? So this related to the engagement aspect as we talked about earlier in our presentation. Another course, Dr. Altman, I know you come from an engineering background, so I thought it'd be good to tie in MC 300 into this, which is the civil and mech engineering class at West Point. So every detail matters in engineering, right? So communicating honestly and feeling comfortable in your company to be able to voice your opinion and know that it'll be heard is super important. I mean, we still have bridges that are failing today because people aren't completely honest with the factors of safety that they're using, and people that on the lower level send up sometimes they're concerned, but they're often muffled. So this, I thought, related well to the engagement factor again. So now that we've applied it to the different courses that we may have taken at West Point, I want to go ahead and apply it to the Army because everyone loves a good Army application since we're all going to be LTs. So the three main concepts that we saw here were engagement, explanation, and expectation. And we found ways to relate these back to the Army because they tie in pretty well. So in terms of engagement, this is really, as we discussed, the feedback for people that are affected by the decision. So basically showing that respect, right? So the way I saw that was through the idea of NCOs. We hear a lot of times of nightmare PLs that go into platoons and say, hey, my word is law, and that's what we're doing. They don't really take into account the people that are going to be directly affected by the decisions, such as the NCOs who have really established the culture of the platoon before you even showed up. So one way I saw that is maybe engaging. It's going to be important for you to engage your NCOs and include them in your decision-making process because they're super knowledgeable and will be able to help you as a new LT. Another relation I saw was explanation. So this boils down to commander's intent, right? Task and purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? Sometimes in the Army, you're going to have situations that are super tough. The training's going to suck. You're not always going to be wanting to do it. So it's important for you as a leader to know the purpose of why you're doing the training so that you can communicate to your Joes, right? You can only fake it for so long, but people pick up pretty quickly on your mood and emotions. So the more you can know the purpose and convey it to your soldiers, the more effective that they will be in that mission or even in that training, right? In terms of expectation, this is the idea of giving the standards up front. Don't be vague about the expectations, right? So in terms of the Army, we do a really good job at this. For standards, we have the APFT, we have scores, and a very, very scientific breakdown. If you don't get this many push-ups, you don't get this many sit-ups, if you don't run this fast, these will be your scores. And it's there for everyone to know. It's public knowledge. It's on the internet. It's taught to people during basic training. So these are pretty clear, and that goes along with different regulations too, right? There's uniform standards, a bunch of different standards in the Army. Another thing that we thought to apply to the Army was the idea that every person mattered. This article talked about not treating people as just personnel or human resources, right? But looking at them as people. And it's especially going to be important in the Army because a lot of people forget that, you're actually leading kids. They're not going to be perfect. They're human. So that's just another thing to take away that we thought relates to the Army. So going on to insights learned. So for fair process and the knowledge economy that we read about, the one thing that I thought was super important was sharing knowledge to build trust, right? It's super key in finding and making a successful voluntary cooperative team. And we learned that these are usually the most effective teams. So basically what that means is when you know something, it's important as a manager to convey it to your soldiers instead of holding it back, because that will make it very vague to your people sometimes, and it'll not make them as motivated to work towards the purpose if they don't really know why they're working towards it. Another thing is keeping the knowledge to oneself. That whole concept, the article talked about how people think, oh, knowledge is power, so keeping it to myself as a manager is more important. And if I leave the rules vague for failure, it'll actually weed out some of the weaker employees and help me with my company. So what I saw was that actually it's just that's gonna foster unfair cultures, and your employees are actually gonna have a lot more distrust for you, and you're not gonna be as cooperative together. So that was one of the other key takeaways that I learned from this. Additionally, this whole mentality of anything that's not shared can be lost, that sort of thing as a manager. So it just leaves a lot of rooms for assumptions, right? So if you learn different standards and learn what things are supposed to be like what right looks like, and you don't always communicate that, you're just kind of assuming that your employees know, and they really might not know. So you might be evaluating somebody on a criteria, but it might be unfair because they didn't know the standards before. Just as we talked about earlier in this case, it mentioned the idea of somebody going past a speeding ticket, like a speed limit sign, but the speed limit sign was turned to the side so you couldn't even see it, right? Just the idea of something being vague in that. And additionally, going off of that, like I mentioned earlier, the difference between human assets or personnel, but people, treating people as the humans they are with dignity and respect is the first major step to forming a cooperative team. Looking at them as just purely human capital and only focusing on the outputs is just dangerous. It's just setting your company up for success or for failure. So these are just some of the key insights I learned. Thank you for your attention, and now back to you, team.